a photographer, to have a single tool that can take you from a wide shot to something that is almost telescopic.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Nikon Theater. If you're tuning back in with Nikon Live, welcome back. We've got 3 more amazing programs today outside the next gentleman I'm about to announce. We have Mike Mesuel coming up after this, who was just out recently photographing volcanoes in Hawaii. And Deanne Fitzmaurice, Pulitzer Prize-winning photojournalist, is going to talk to you about filmmaking. But the next photographer coming up, well, I guess I'd call you a photographer, a writer, a mentor, a little bit of everything. RC Concepcion. He's going to talk to you about exploring your photographic voice right here at the Nikon Theater. RC Concepcion.
Thank you very much, everybody. So, welcome. I'm glad everybody's here. I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk to you guys about kind of an evolution, right? I spend a lot of time as a teacher and photographer, and I think it's always a good time for us to kind of step back away from the technology and the technique and kind of have a little bit of story time and talk a little bit about kind of where I've been and how I'm getting to where I'm going, and hopefully the process will give you guys some inspiration and some ideas of things to be able to think about. So the entire thing was all about photographic voice, and a lot of the times, a lot of the work that I do is very much talking about language as photography, and I tend to be not a person who focuses on one very specific thing. Like, I like shooting different types of things, like, right? So this is a ballerina and a baby. Now, yes, it happens to be my daughter and my wife, full disclosure, but there are times when I feel like I need to express myself visually, realistically, giving some sort of measure of story, but then at the same time, there are also instances where I want to be able to tell scenes. So let's say, for example, that's legendary kickboxer Bill Superfoot Wallace, and we had probably 5 minutes to set up the entire scene from scratch. So we set up multiple speed lights, and we're like, okay, let's try to create something that looks somewhat realistic, right? There are also times when I tend to do things that happen to be a little bit more impressionistic. I am not the type of person that, from a photographic standpoint, I don't put myself in a box where I turn around and say, this needs to be a specific way. I need to talk about something very specifically. There are times when I happen to be very literal and very methodical about that stuff, but I also tend to look at my photography from a standpoint of almost kind of like crayons to paper, right? I want to go play, I want to go have fun, I want to go do interesting things, and be damned what happens with all of that stuff. I want to express myself differently, right? I'll do things like this, right? Interior architectures, and have them look very hyper-realistic with the work that I do, right? There are times that I do things like this. I call this one, Why Mommy Drinks. Right, so this is the kind of stuff that I tend to work on, but I figured it'd be a good idea for me to kind of explain to you guys like how I started. So back as a kid, that's not right. Hey, what up? Better. So back when I was a little kid, I was really excited about photography. I was really interested about it, and I grew up in the Bronx, right? My mom and dad never went to school, but we would take trips into the city, and every now and again, over on 10th, we would try to look for one of these guys, right? One of those little, remember those guys that would dip into water? And there was this spot that used to sell all of these things right in Manhattan. So I remember as a kid coming in from the Bronx, I used to live in the South Bronx, and you drive all the way over to go find these things, and in the middle of all of that stuff, I would fall in love with the city. So I developed a love affair and a relationship with making images inside of the city, right? And I would spend most of my time going out and finding different vantage points and finding different places for me to talk and show different vantage points of a place that I love, right? A place that means a lot to me. I actually almost fell off of this thing, right? This is one of the gargoyles in the Chrysler building, and I decided to take a step there before one of the security guards grabbed me. This is a very hallowed place for me. A lot of amazing photographers have shot out of this point. It also happens to be something that is very, very special to me, and I go out and every year I try to be able to make a picture to remind myself of those that we lost on 9/11. Now, I've done all of this stuff and I've worked on all of this photography and I'm doing great and I'm doing wonderful and you guys will be on that exact same journey. And in the middle of all of that journey, I can tell you that you will receive a gut punch. And it will test who you are going to be as a photographer. My gut punch was this one. This was a picture that I did. This guy is Bill the Hurricane Peacock. And he has a shot that he does. That's a trick shot that banks off of the corner pocket, jumps over, and hits the corner ball and hits the pocket. And I was so excited about making the shot. I was like, this is awesome. I want to do this shot. The guy's like, hey, listen, I'm going to commission you. We're going to do this inside of Photoshop. And I'm like, I got to be honest with you. I want to do this with one frame. So this is a 2-second exposure that's shot with a 1.5-second stroboscopic shot with a fake rear curtain sync by holding a remote trigger inside of a snoot to be able to capture him. There's like 9 lights. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's a Gary Fong light sphere taped right here. And the exposure started with the lights on. And as soon as I heard the ball, the lights went off. All of the flashes went off. I had a rear curtain sync. Right before the curtain closed, I popped the trigger and I hit him so that he were in focus. One shot. Perfect. In my eyes. I took it to somebody who I admired, and they turned around and they said, it's like a technically perfect picture desperately trying to find a home. I was like, oh. And I went home and I cried and I licked my wounds and I looked at the picture the following day and I said, they're right. So this picture sits on my wall as my Moby Dick. I sit and I go, this is the picture that I'm waiting for. And now I have the technique and I'll find it. So you need to be able to kind of come back out from all of that stuff. Sometimes you get a picture. Sometimes you get a story. And sometimes you get both. You have to understand, it's like fishing. You want to go out, sometimes you get the fish, sometimes the fish gets you. Like this example. So this was a story that happened to me down in Chinatown. Inside of Chinatown, I was hanging out with a guy named PJ. PJ took me to this restaurant over on Bayard Street. Inside of there, we found this amazing, amazing, amazing Chinese restaurant covered in dollar bills. And immediately I say to myself, the bedside manner of the photographer is the most important thing that you need to keep in mind. I have this entire thing where I walk into the spot and I'm like, this is amazing. But in my head, I saw those guys in the corner and I'm like, aperture, focus, distance, where I get to do this. But outside, on the other side, I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is awesome. I can't believe this. All I'm doing is trying to get as far in to the restaurant as I can. I want to make sure that I could get to a spot, so I tell PJ, go in and start signing dollars and figure it out. Nobody knows what's going on, right? Deflect, deflect, deflect. The guys are in the corner and they're looking at me like this. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is awesome, this is awesome. And I'm like grabbing all the stuff and I'm like, all right, yeah, F5.6, I gotta do this, I gotta grab that one thing. But they're like, this is amazing, this is wonderful. I send him off. This was literally like a scene from like The Godfather. There was one family in the corner. There was a cop, like a beat cop, sitting in on the opposite side. I expected like Jimmy the Fish to come out and just be like, bam! But in the middle of all of that stuff, I was like, I don't know, man, I don't know. I gotta figure this out, I gotta figure this out. I saw the guys. One of the guys turned around and said, are you a photographer? And I was like, yes. Look, I took some pictures of some churches yesterday because I figured that'd be safe. Here you go. And he looks at me and he's like, you got a gift. And I'm like, yes. And that brings me to the other message. Ask for what you want. Immediately I looked at them and I said, I want to take your picture. The guy looked at me, looked at the other guy, looked at the other guy, because they all look like a little mobby. I don't know, they could be nice guys. But he looked at me and I looked at them and I was like, I want to take the 3 of your pictures right now. And he's like, okay. Literally, my tripod went, like all the legs were immediately out, they were immediately open. I sat down, I grabbed all the stuff, I took the shot, and that was the shot that I got. I grabbed everything, I wrapped everything up, I put everything up, and I'm walking away. That guy in the center turns around and looks at me as I'm walking away, and he's just like, hey, be careful. And I'm like, yeah, man, it's totally cool. Great, thank you so much, thank you so much. And in the middle of it, he turns around and he goes, hey. And I turn around and he's like, be careful. And I'm like, okay. I shut everything, and as I'm closing the door, this guy turns to that guy and goes, hey, those guys are the FBI. I'm like, oh, okay, great. Sometimes you get both. So for me, story and how I get to all of that stuff is supremely important to me. I'll tell you another story that has nothing to do with photography, but everything to do with photography. I call it the words. I grew up in the South Bronx with a goatee. That's my dad. He never went to school a day in his life. My mom never went to school a day in her life. My dad was a janitor. He was a super in a building. And I grew up and I went to high school. I went to junior high school and I would sit there and I would work. And I was a very angry kid. And as an angry kid, this is where I lived, right? I would go out there, and in the middle of all of that stuff, I lived down there in the basement. And I went to school here. In the middle of all of that stuff, I met a lady named Edna Senderoff. And Edna Senderoff was an English teacher. And I had attitude. They put me in this advanced English class, and I was like, I want to get out, and I want to go play handball with my friends. And the lady turned around, and she looked at me one day, and she turned around, and she said, hey, listen, come here. I want to talk to you for a second. Do you know what an epiphany is? And I'm like, no. She's like, I know what your problem is. She's like, your problem, this is junior high. She's like, your problem is you do not know the words to express yourself. You have all of this stuff that sits inside you, but you do not know the words on how to be able to express yourself. That's what I want to teach you. If you come back tomorrow, I will teach you the words. If you don't come back tomorrow, those feelings and all of that stuff that you have will kill you. I was like, okay. I left, I thought about it, and I came back the following day. Unbeknownst to anybody, I took up Shakespeare. Unbeknownst to everybody, I became the editor of the junior high school paper. And in the middle of all of that, the kid that didn't want anything to do with anything turned out to be an author. 8 books. I'm working on two more books now. So somebody took the time to talk to me about the words, to learn how to express myself. And in the middle of all of that stuff, I went back to go talk to her, and she passed away. But I like to think that she had an impact, had an impression on me to be able to express myself with all of that. And I go back and I think about this from a photographic standpoint. And I go, how do I use what I learned then to talk about how I express myself photographically now? Is it about gear? Is it about the latest and the greatest and all of that stuff? Or is it about the feelings that we have inside and figure out how to be able to express those things? So I became a teacher. Right? I'm still a teacher. I'm a teacher now. I tend to think of myself more as a teacher than I do a photographer. So I always teacher everything up, right? And I think to myself, like, well, shutter literally is like a verb, right? Like you think about it, and when you think about shutter, I think of everything as like a verb. So I'm like, this is Dancing House in Prague, and I'm like, I can use the shutter to be able to influence activities and influence how we work with speed. I can also use that same shutter to influence a certain amount of dynamism, right? This is Ricky Jamie. I was doing this shot right before he went to So You Think You Can Dance. So if you follow him, he literally can leap that high. It was amazing. You can use it to instill a certain amount of feelings inside of people. I don't have to tell you what the next shot looks like. You kind of have an idea. It didn't end pretty for me or the camera or the lens. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm going to get the shot, right? I'm deathly afraid of heights. But I'll go up, I'll have to change underwear, I'll have to like, you know, pick up, throw up from somewhere else, but I'm gonna go get that shot because I have a story I wanna tell, right? Aperture, I tend to think of it as almost kind of like a noun, right? That person, that place, that thing that is gonna help us, right? Simple picture, easy picture, right? One light on this one side, one light as a fill, an SB sitting in the corner, lighting a little bit of the back of that. I travel very, very small. Couple speed lights inside of a bag, couple of tripods, and I'm good to go. Because for me, the gear and the technology and all of that stuff that we work with happens to be secondary to the things that sit inside of my head. I'm constantly serving the images that sit inside of my head more than I am the gear and the technology and all that stuff. What's the story? And then how do I manifest that into a picture? I think that that's probably the more important thing, right? So a lot of the stuff that I work on, when I work in that space, I tend to work very simple, very easy, very clean, right? Simple subjects. This is my daughter, right? And I'm doing a picture of her, Steve Jobs. He used to have a habit of getting goaded by the press, right? He'd say something, the press would send something to him, he'd say something mean, and then the press would grab the emails and they'd publish them. And I turned around and I was like, I sent this picture, sent it to Steve, and I was just like, listen, man, for all of the people that goad you in the press, this is what the future looks like. This was like one of the first pictures of like one of the first iPads. And I was like, for as much as you get goated, this is the future. This is a waffle. But I turned around and I sent it to him and I was just like, I'm so grateful for what you're doing with this. He sent an email back and he was like, I love this picture. Can you send me a high resolution? And I'm like, yep, here you go. Exported it out and I sent it over to him. And people freaked. They were just like, dude, you just sent that picture to Apple. What if they use it? And I'm like, if they use it, Sabine goes to college. But he didn't use it, so she goes to community college. I'm totally kidding. For me, it was about the story. Sometimes you get the story, sometimes you get the picture, sometimes you get both. So, the other thing that I talk about is color for story. So, I like to go out and shoot in the Middle East. I shoot out there quite a bit. I have a lot of clients that go out there, and I spend a lot of time either taking pictures or working on commission projects. So I get to spend a lot of time out there. Just hanging out. I think it's kind of neat. I'm always looking for a different way to be able to express, and in these instances, these were like D500 shots that we did for story. Right? Trying to find new vantage points of some of the work that I did. This is a lot of stuff that's shot on the D850. I tend to have like a little homie of Arabia kind of thing. So I'll go out and just do and experiment with all sorts of different things. Color then plays an important part for most of that stuff. Now, leaning into what you love is something that happens to be very important. A lot of the times, like I shoot really weird. Like I follow McNally, he's a really, really good friend. I follow Mazel's a really, really good friend. Heisler, a really good friend. They could not shoot any more diametrically opposed to what I do. However, you gotta lean into what you love. You gotta do what you do, right? A lot of the times I shoot HDR, hyper realistic, and everybody's like, oh, it's awesome, it's great, it's very, but sometimes it's a little Kincaid, right? Thomas Kincaid kind of stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go to a flea market, I'm gonna find myself a flea market Santa, I'm gonna put my daughter on top of him, and oh, no, wait, before that, I leaned into the color situation. I'm gonna use color to be able to tell stories. So this is in Venice, right? There's a very, very famous saying that talks about not shooting what it looks like, but shooting what it feels like. That's what I'm looking for. I wanna shoot what it feels like. I don't wanna shoot what it looks like. That's me pulling out the crayons and just going nuts. The Kincaid thing, I leaned into it and I was like, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna find that Santa Literally, there's chicken wire here, there's chicken wire here, and the most amazing Santa in the center. Why not? If it's all about story. I go out to conferences, right? This guy spends an ungodly amount of time trying to look like he belongs in a movie. And we spend all of our camera work to go out to places like this to take this picture, which doesn't do him justice. But this does. So the goal is to serve the vision more than anything else. That's the important part about what we want to do. That's inspired me. I've wanted to do kind of like a little bit more of a fine art series, following the Stormtrooper home and seeing what kind of things he gets into, right? And it leads you into a whole bunch of different directions. I think it's totally fine. I think it's great. It's awesome, right? But then I get deeper into social political issues. Like I'm like, you know, what's it look like for race relations? Like, right? We're gonna work it out. Right? It's pretty good. I think we're gonna do fine. But most importantly, in the process of all of this, I've learned that I have been the happiest as a photographer knowing that I can work in the service of others. That has been the biggest gift. Recently, I did a bunch of work for Nikon Professional Services in coordination with Western Digital. And I went out and we shot inside of Panama to be able to do some stuff. Like, did you guys know that you could take the D850 cameras and the D500 cameras and you can go out and you can put them together with a couple of units to be able to shoot in remote locations, and with a hard drive, you can pass all of that stuff directly into the camera. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. Rather than do like a stand-up tutorial where I go, all right, well, let me just go out and do a how-to video. I was like, let's go out, let's go to Panama, let's go to figure this out. Let's go take a look at different scenarios. Let's take all of the gear with us. I spent a lot more time in the world of video doing all of this kind of stuff. And I won't show you too much after this, but it's like you're in the jungle, you're hanging out, you're doing all of this stuff. And there's a big reveal here that I do want to show you, so I'll let that go a little bit. But there I am. Like, obviously, you check your phone when you're walking, and then you drop stuff, so you got to be able to do that. But we're out making this picture. Oh, I got to go get in the water. Oh, there's the drive. What are you doing? Oh, I don't know, maybe, oh, snap. There's the big reveal. So we're doing a picture of this one person, and I'm sitting there making these shots, and I'm doing all of this stuff in the water connected to this one drive. You don't really know that that's what's happening. You're like, oh, I'm gonna get a little closer. But then, oh yeah, I'm in the middle of the water. Oh, it's transferring. Nikon. Right? So I thought that was pretty cool. But that entire project came to me out of nowhere from one scene that no one will see, which was this one. I was looking for a way to connect with people, and I was like, I want to find indigenous people inside of Panama. And I found, while I was doing this, a lady who is pregnant. And somebody's trying as best they can to do a picture from the side of the water. And they're like Gunayala, like original, Panamanian. And I'm like, I'm taking that shot. Don't worry about it, man. I got you. I jumped in the water. And being in the water was where I got the idea for the video, which I had no idea about the day before. And this is the shot that I'm more impressed with. While I love the video, that's more important to me. While I love being able to go to different locations and travel and look like the most amazing photographer in the world, this is another project that I did with Nikon. Or I was doing some stuff with SanDisk, this SSD drive. It looks awesome. It looks really cool. But what I went there for was because I wanted to try to make pictures of people swimming with whale sharks. Big, giant whale sharks the size of a school bus. I didn't know how to swim. Drowned halfway through it, literally. Underwater camera, grabbing all this stuff, and I'm like, dear God, it's got to be what it feels like to die. Threw up inside of my thing, had to take it all off, got water inside of the unit, but I got this the day before shooting for a friend of mine. And because of that, I had the good fortune to get this. D850 raw shot. This person was shooting JPEG. I also got a flipping manta ray. Like literally, like flipping. Like I was trying manta ray flipping, and we figured we'd try to do something different. So for me, working in the service of others helps. Yes, I still go out to Dubai and make pictures. I still chase beautiful work. I still go out. This is actually a 5-shot pano that's done with a D810. So it's literally like, it sits like 8.5 feet long in my house. I still like chasing beautiful work. I still like going out. This is a multiple D850 pano that is shot inside of Venice, Italy, with one canoe floating in the center. And the canoe is probably my most important part yet. She'll see why. That person happens to be the person that now is one of my best friends. So I work in service of my friend. I work in service of her, trying to get her to teach her story to other people. That's the important part. Working in the service of other people. That's what you're supposed to do. I now have the good fortune to go out and take all of that stuff into the halls of Syracuse University. So I teach with Bruce Strong and Dean Branham, and all those people have given me an opportunity to mold the next set of people. On top of everything, now I can call myself a professor. And I pass what Edna passed to everybody else. Find the words, find the story, find the voice, work in service of others, and go out and make great pictures. Thank you very much, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, RC Concepcion. Stick around. We are going to transition within a minute to the next program that you do not want to miss. The most beautiful pictures within landscape I have ever seen, and he has just photographed volcanic activity in Hawaii. Mike Mesuel II coming up next, right here at the Nikon Theater.
I feel like David Attenborough.
So gorgeous too. This is so cool. That's so pretty. It's beautiful.
Beautiful.
Doesn't get much better than this.
You can see everything down there.